Hi everybody, welcome to the RAAus Airservices live stream. We've got a cast of thousands on the screen there for everybody, and I thought I'd start off by introducing myself, RAAus Head of Flight Operations, Jill Bailey. Got Jordan Portlock is our Assistant Head of Flight Operations from South Australia. And from the Airservices team, we have David Wells, who's the Head of Service Improvement for Airservices. Welcome, David. And we have Simon Blake, who's our operational lead for the SAFIS in Ballina. And we have Matt DeRuggio, who is our ATC subject matter expert, or the man on the console for Ballina. So I thought to start with, we'll hand over to David, who can introduce the topic on behalf of Airservices.
Yeah, hi, welcome everybody. We've got a bit of a slideshow to go through tonight. Jill's got a few questions that she's got already to throw in the mix there, and then at the end we'll open it up to a Q&A. We've got a chat function that you should be able to access there, and we'll answer those questions as best we can. If you wanted to bring up the first slide from our presentation, I can just give you an overview of what we're going to talk about. Sorry, the second slide. So tonight, the team will give you a recap on how we've got to deliver the surveillance flight information service at Ballina this week, commenced last Thursday. Some of the legal information or the regulatory information around the RP SUP that was affected to provide this service there at Ballina, what the volume there looks like, the frequency, etc. What your VHF carriage and broadcast requirements are, what sort of surveillance service we'll be offering you, whether that be ADS-B or SSR, mode Charlie, altitude, etc. What the controller does when they're providing that service. We've got a couple of shots of what they're seeing on the radar screen. Then we'll run through a few flight threads for the typical flights that you participate in the region, and then a Q&A session in the end. Thanks, Jill.
Oh, awesome. Thanks, David. This is going to be fun. So, Simon, I think you're going to take us through the presentation in broad terms. And as we said before, we're going to take comments and questions at appropriate times. So start putting those up on Facebook and YouTube, and we'll be able to get our audience engaged as we go. So over to you, Simon.
Thank you. And if you could just go to the next slide, please. Yeah, and along this thing, we'll go through some flight threading as well. What I mean by that is we're going to take you through a flight that goes all the way through the airspace, south, north, west, east. If you come up with certain flight threads, we can also go through those along the way. But the big dot points here, SFIS is offered IFR and VFR. No priority there. It's a non-towered aerodrome, designated broadcast area using the discrete CTAF. SFIS is delivered by Controller Situation in Brisbane. And as you can see on that screen, that was day one. That was the first minute, I believe, actually. And so that designated controller is just doing this sector. It's not combined up with anything else. They're just doing Ballina SFIS, that 15 nautical mile radius there. It cannot be combined with another sector. And it's not a separation service, and it does not we don't sequence aircraft into the aerodrome. Yep, it's a broadcast area, prescribed hours, which I'll go through shortly. And the good thing is Ballina already has a broadcast area, so that'll help a lot of people that are going through there at the moment and have been. But along this, we're also going to go through what we've noticed in week one. And I'll try and target this to the VFRs, but I'll also bring up the IFRs and what you can expect from them. And also what we're looking from you, and also some feedback from you, what you're looking from us. We're trying to tighten this up as much as possible. We're looking for all the feedback we can get today, tomorrow, day 30, day 60. We're trying to feed this system with everything, every piece of information we can find. If you just the next slide, please. Yep, so I'll just go through the broadcast area here, just in case I'm not aware of it. So the yellow on the screen there is the broadcast area. As I said, Ballina already has one, but I'll go through the full details. So up to the north, that's a 30 DME Gold Coast step. We go up to it, we don't go underneath it. Again, the yellow is surface to 8,500. 15 nautical miles, excluding that 30 DME step there. And then we're also out to the west. Now, if you know Ballina a little bit, you'll know Lismore Aerodrome is approximately 16 nautical miles Ballina. Reference that and a few other reasons, we've cut out Lismore Aerodrome 5 nautical miles. And I'll get back to those reasons shortly. So VHF coverage at this, one of those things we've got to talk about. Actually, I'll just touch back. 124.2 is the CTAF frequency at the moment. It's a CTAF frequency for Lismore, Casino, Evans Head, and Ballina. That's the frequency we'll be using for our VHF, and those will all be remaining at the moment. You may be aware CASA sent out a survey, I think in May, that got returned in June, and they're looking at that to see if Ballina can be its own frequency. So at the moment, all those frequencies, all those aerodromes are on one frequency, but CASA is looking at changing that. The 124.2, another thing to remember here, surface to 8,500, it acts as the area frequency. So for IFR aircraft, there's only one frequency they need to remain on. So instead of the 203 frequency, inside these hours, 124.2 is the CTAF and the area frequency. The VHF that we've put there, so the testing and also now after week 1 has shown that 1,500 AGL for Lismore is approximately when we'll pick up aircraft. So that was the first reason why we wanted to exclude that Lismore aerodrome. We won't get the taxi calls at Lismore. Another reason with that, also wanted to keep the circuit out of Lismore out of the mandatory broadcast requirements. But the biggest reason is it's easy to understand. 5 nautical miles Lismore aerodrome is the cutout. It's not that long, so it's not cut out to reference the RNAV points. That's just 5 nautical miles Lismore aerodrome. So that's the broadcast area. I'm just going to go through some flight threading, reference that. So if you just stay on that slide for me, please. Yep, so if you just picture a VFR north to south, tracking Gold Coast to Grafton if you know the area well. If not, just west of Ballina, that aeroplane in the middle, it'll be just tracking from the north part of the airspace to the south. As the AAP sub states, VFR aircraft are required to call prior to or as soon as possible upon entering the broadcast area. Now, if you have a flight plan and a transponder, you'll be given a code. If you're not already on a code, you'll be identified and giving relevant traffic or pertinent traffic as we see it. Now, this is one of the big aims of ours. With the CAGRIS, what was noted is a lot of traffic was getting given. Everything that was in the broadcast area was traffic. We're trying to reduce that to only pertinent traffic. What I mean by that is VFR aircraft calls tracking north to south, as I said, out to the west. They are not traffic for the aircraft just south of Cape Byron. You'll get the traffic of the aircraft relevant to you. If there is no additional traffic, once you get to transiting at that 15 nautical miles, the next call you can expect is identification terminates, frequency change approved. Now, the big thing is here we come in. This is what I want to point out. This is still a CTAF, still Class G. All those things still apply for you. We've given you the traffic, the very precise traffic. And what we want is you to now use that traffic to go communicate with those aircraft, as you are doing now. Just see if I can fix my mic up there for you. Yeah, so that means we're watching you through. That doesn't mean we stop. We've given you the traffic, and now you're to discuss that traffic, discuss with other traffic on your operations. However, we're still there. If you're discussing with another aircraft and we see that it's getting too close, we'll come in. We'll be like, Alpha Bravo Charlie. Traffic, Delta Echo Foxtrot, now 3 miles in your 2 o'clock. Call could come back from you, got them in sight. That's great. We can move on. Could also be a miscommunication. An aircraft could give you a false level that we see on our screen, and we can advise that. We'll report that. We'll go, Alpha Bravo Charlie, confirm at 3,000. That's the sort of call you can expect. Also, you can expect, if you're in discussions with another aircraft confirming you're clear, and we see you on surveillance, well clear, this is where we'll come in. Alpha Bravo Charlie, Delta Echo Foxtrot's 5 miles west of your position, tracking away. Just something to clean up the comms, moves it on. You can move on to your next operation. So that's a VFR under surveillance. VFR not under surveillance. And this is where also, it's not a requirement to have ADSB or transponders, but what is a requirement if you do have the gear is to turn it on and use it appropriately. And we can't emphasize that enough. If you do that, it'll help us immensely. Another thing that will help us a lot, and again, not a requirement, and my fellow controller is going to go through shortly why this is the case. Flight plans. If you can put the flight plan, if you're able to put that flight plan, it'll help us and it will help the whole system. And that's what this service is about. If everyone does a little bit more, the service will be better and better. And we've had a few questions on what if I don't know exactly perfectly where I'm going or change my intentions in flight? That's fine. It's much easier if I've already got details in the system to adjust them. If I've already got Alpha Bravo Charlie and you advise I'm now tracking east of the coast instead of west, that's fine. I can update that very quickly. And again, not a requirement to have a flight plan. Our people are very good at creating them. It'll just help the process. So we'll go with the VFR, not under surveillance. So picture Cape Byron up there. If you can just see just north of the broadcast area, that little point. VFR aircraft, same rules, calls prior to or as soon as possible. Now this is where you can expect one or two questions. This is where we're trying to confirm just a little bit where you are relevant to other traffic. And this is done for a couple of reasons, to help us give you information on other traffic and rule you out of other traffic. So this is where we're asking you if you can be concise, especially on that first call. And we know this will come with experience. We also understand that pilots have different experiences out there as well, different levels of experience. Now, controls will be listening to that. Certain pilots may get a more precise question because they sound a little stronger on the comms. So it could be stuff like confirm operating east of the coast. And so those sort of things, if you're going to tell us, that'd be great. Ballina information. So that's our call sign, by the way. Ballina information, 124.2. Ballina information, Alpha Bravo Charlie, tracking east of the coast, 2,500. That's a great call, gives us a great deal of information. The next call you can expect, we might go report south of Ballina or south of the field. The next call could be report at 15 miles south of Ballina. Now that's not a mandatory call to call clear of the broadcast area, but we're doing that for our purposes to rule you out of traffic. If we've got no traffic, we won't ask that call, but it's not a mandatory call to report clear of the broadcast area. The VFR aircraft on taxi. So what you can expect, making a taxi call on this frequency. Now this is where we might not be aware that you have a transponder or not. So we will give you a code. If you don't have a transponder, that's fine. You can just advise us that and we'll move on to the next job. We'll give you pertinent traffic at that point, the traffic in the circuit. If there's numerous aircraft in the circuit, you can expect something like 3 VFR aircraft in the circuit and Jetstar 5 mile final. Another thing that will help us with this, and this will help with the congestion as well, if you tell me on your taxi call, I'm aware of the 3 VFR aircraft in the circuit and Jetstar and 5 mile finals, bang, you've done the job. I'll be like, Alpha Bravo Charlie, no additional traffic. And again, that just cleans it up, tightens the calls, takes it off the frequency. It got raised when we were down in Heck Field. Someone asked, can we ask questions? Of course, definitely ask us questions if you have any. And I mean that on the frequency. If you want a mode Charlie checked, if you want advice on where a certain aircraft is, what they're landing on at the moment, the last 3 aircraft, a weather report from a certain destination, please do ask, do speak up. I do understand, and I have been told that we come across a little bit full on. We're a little blunt with our questions. That's how we've been trained, to try and get the precise information from you. So don't take that as a negative. We're just trying to find out the information quickly so we can help you. And that's really what we're trying to do. We're not trying to be the police here if you're off track by a couple of miles and get you in trouble. We'd like to advise you of more information then. I'll go through the IFR aircraft quickly. If you just go back to that slide, please. If you know Ballina, you'd know that, so just take the RPTs. They call up about 50 to 60 miles south of Ballina. They're still going to do the same thing. Now, the big thing with SFIS coming in is this person who does this sector will sit directly next to the controller who does the sector neighboring them. Now, what that means is all that IFR cohort that was previously done on this frequency, a majority of that IFR traffic will be passed internally, so it won't have to be done on this frequency to lower that congestion. And another thing, reference the IFR as well. While I've got it on point, we've heard that and this goes for VFR as well. So this go both. This is trying to teach everyone, and we are instructing IFR pilots this and VFR pilots vice versa. But some of the IFR pilots are using IFR points when they're giving their broadcast or saying where they are, saying they're at Napalmi or Whiskey Echo. And VFR pilots are saying they're overhead Tom's Farm. Now, as much as we'd like people to change that and reference some of the major points like Ballina, Lismore, Lennox Head, Bangalow Township, the river, and the coastline, we understand it could still happen, but that's where we come in. We're a translator. If you want updates of where Jetstar is, I can be like, Jetstar's 10 miles south of Ballina, passing 3,500. So that's where I'll update you on that position. So yeah, the IFR traffic coming in, also we're going to see them a long way south. We're going to see what approach they're doing a long way south. So we can update you of that quite early and keep you updated. And please feel free to ask where they're at. If you want an exact position of where Jetstar's at, just say, where's Jetstar at? Bang, I'll give you that position in 10 seconds. We've also had communications that the RPTs, because as fast as they're going, the see and avoid is quite tough. So they're really trying to make communicate, have communication with all the pilots that are relevant to them, just confirming their positions all the time. We have a great relationship with these RPTs as air traffic controllers, and we'll be instructing them where those aircraft are. That's where it comes in. That aircraft is clear. Jetstar 636, Alpha Bravo Charlie is 5 miles west of your position. And again, we're going to be working with them constantly, just as we're hoping to work with you guys constantly as this is. So that's a majority of what we expect from the VFRs and how we're going to process it. Jill, is there any questions first before I go to Matt D to explain why we're doing some of these things?
No, I think the only thing we've got so far is a comment from one of our CFIs saying this is very helpful. So that's a great start as far as I'm concerned. We're only 15 minutes into it and we've got some good positive comments. So no, that's good to hear. Oh, there's a question here from Warwick. What airspeed does Jetstar approach? It's a good question.
So they'll constantly be slowing down, but I mean, they'll be 250 knots and then constantly slowing, probably on final nearing. They'd be below 160 on final. If you wanted exact numbers, I could look that up. But yeah, that's
all right. I think probably Warwick is more interested in, I guess, from a perspective of an aircraft that we're used to. We might be approaching at 80 or 100 knots and slowing down to 60. Obviously, Jetstar and the like will be coming in a lot faster, and that's the whole point of the SAFA system.
100%. And I'll touch on that's and Matt DeRugio will explain a few things, reference that as well shortly. What I will point out as well, if we just go back to that map quickly, sorry. So, and we're definitely trying to get out here as much as possible, touch base, be in contact with RAAus and many VFR pilots and IFR pilots to try and get everyone doing the right thing, and that includes us. However, we do understand people might not be doing that. They just might have misread something, tried to stay clear of the broadcast area, and just it didn't work that day. So what you can expect there, again, just say South Cape Byron, VFR aircraft, mode Charlie, mode Alpha, no flight plan, hasn't made a call. This is when we just make a call. VFR aircraft 2 miles south of Cape Byron on code 1200, passing 2,500, Ballina information. And again, we're not trying to be the police, get you in trouble. We're trying to just make sure we know who you are so we can pass information on to you and then pass information on to the other pilots who might be traffic for you. Now, again, it could be no response. They might have stayed on the area frequency previous to that. This is where the SFIS product comes in really handy. We still see that surveillance track. We can pass that traffic to every other aircraft that's relevant to that traffic. Also, just say there's no transponder, no ADSB, aircraft calls up 5 miles north of Evans Head. Just make an Evans Head call, not directed to Ballina information. Again, our controls are trained for that. Our ears will prick up, and we'll just be like, Alpha Bravo Charlie, this is Ballina information. You are north of Evans Head, something like that. That sort of call. Not trying to get you in trouble, just trying to get the information so we can pass it to other aircraft. So I'm now going to pass on to, if we could just, I'll pass on to Matt DeRugio. So he was actually the first controller that sitting in the Ballina SFIS seat. He was a major part of designing the sim training, and he's also the checking in standards for the Ballina SFIS. And he has a really good understanding of what's happened this first week. He's sort of going to go why we're doing things, and we'll just show you the sort of display that he was seeing.
Okay, hi everyone. I just figure I'll give you guys a little bit of my background in addition to what Simon said there, just so that I guess you have some perspective of where I've been involved and with Airservices. So I've been controlling for I've been with the company since 2012, and before that I did a Bachelor of Aviation and a RPL, and I'm currently doing a little bit of flying to get my PPL. So I do have some experience flying and a fairly low hour pilot as well. So I definitely can relate when pilots seem a bit intimidated by controllers at first, because I've been in that position myself. Anyway, if we could pull up the slide, please, with the photo of the console. There we go. So I just want to talk through, basically, this is what the controller looks at. It's effectively a top-down view of the airspace. You can see this is basically a simulated screenshot. We have each aircraft with a little velocity vector that helps us project ahead. So you see those two, the green lines with a little dot in them. That's where the aircraft will be in 1 minute and where it will be in 2 minutes. And that's really part of our bread and butter with how we assess whether aircraft are in conflict or aren't in conflict. We project along those velocity vectors to make an assessment if aircraft are going to be clear or if they're going to be too close. The other useful things that we have there, in this case, both aircraft are on surveillance, and we get a little readout of the level that they are currently at, and the level that they've told us that they're intending to operate at. So aircraft 1234 is currently at 2,600 feet, and it's descending down to 000, which is effectively that's what we input for when they're landing. There's a little 15 there to say that it's doing 150 knots, and its destination is Ballina. It's a Boeing 737. And so when we were discussing the issues with flight planning, it's basically we have to populate all of those fields in order to make a flight plan, and that's why controllers generally will have to ask so many questions if somebody hasn't submitted a flight plan. It's for many of you, I'm sure you've used NAIPS previously. It's not the most user-friendly system, so we understand that it is time-consuming, or it can be a little bit fiddly getting your flight plans in there, but it really does help us to be able to get an accurate, we call them a track, get an accurate track on our screen, so that what we have recorded on the screen reflects what your aircraft is actually doing. And that's basically why you get a whole lot of questions. Touching back on transponders and surveillance coverage, where it's very helpful if people have the equipment and they operate it, as Simon said, it's not at all about policing and watching you to make sure you're doing something, whether you're doing something incorrect or not. It's really the surveillance coverage helps us pass traffic a lot more accurately. Rather than having a rough ballpark of where your aircraft is and what it's doing, we can see it straight away, and we have to ask a lot less questions because what we see on the screen is where you actually are. Yeah, I think, is that what you sort of wanted for now, Simon, with that slide?
Yeah, that's what I was looking as well.
You maybe have to add there?
No, that's good. That's what we're looking for. Actually, if you could just go to the slide after and just explain the BRL.
Yes, sure.
Yeah. So just the slide, the zoomed in one. Yep. Just if you explain the BRL.
Okay. So you can see on Alpha Bravo Charlie's little track symbol, there's a 13.5, and that's basically a tool that we have. We can anchor it anywhere on our screen and on one point, and then anchor the other end onto an aircraft. And so that BRL, bearing and range line, is telling us that aircraft is 13.5 miles north of Ballina. It's going to be estimating Ballina at time 0357, and it's bearing 014 in true degrees there. So that's a good way for us to manage where aircraft are or pass relative positions to each other. We just put a BRL between two aircraft, and we can say you're going to be 2 miles apart from each other, or Alpha Bravo Charlie's 13 miles north of the field, tracking southbound. That sort of thing is how we use that, and it gives us a very good estimate for where aircraft are going to be. I think that's probably all we can really add for that, Tim.
Right, thanks for that, Matt. So that goes, Matt, to the tools and techniques. So that's just some of the tools and sort of toys that we have to play with to sort of illustrate where you are and how we can help provide that just relevant traffic. We're trying to really reduce that broad thing. So you may have seen over to the right, there was some text on screen. So we're also going to use that when we get information from pilots, just to record information. We've got Scratchpad in front of us. The RAD tag is what we call, just say you don't have a flight plan, but you have a transponder. As much as I'm saying I'd love you to have flight plans, we do have techniques and tools for that as well, to get you on to surveillance quickly and showing you where you're going and showing us where you're going. So as Matt said, the velocity vectors are really important, because that's where we're planning ahead to go, okay, you are traffic. All right, you're clear of that aircraft. Don't have to give you traffic. But again, stem back to Class G CTAF procedures. The big thing we want to do is give you this relevant traffic, so you have much more time for your heads-up flying. So you've now got those 4 aircraft possibly that you're in conflict with, or possible conflict, as we say, and you can now be in discussions. Alpha Bravo Charlie, Delta Echo Foxtrot, now talking to each other. Again, we're still shepherding you through this service. We're still there listening to all those calls appropriately. If we need to come in, we will come in. If you want some more information on someone that isn't giving you the best information back, we're there as well. And I think we'll be proactive with that as well. When we hear the conversations are not going as well as they should and we can help, we'll jump in. The radar coverage. So I think, so in the first week, we've seen a few flights from Lismore to Ballina. So the surveillance coverage, 3,500 feet. There are times out to the west of Ballina that if you're underneath that, we don't have you. That's west of that mountains. If you know Ballina well, there's some lovely mountains out there, so we just won't pick you up. And that's where you might just get a couple of questions more. And if people have flown down there this week, they're probably hearing more conversations from our controllers than they might get in the future. With the low level of with the COVID causing low level of traffic, we're sort of using this as a great opportunity to build our relationship with the local operators and get our local knowledge up as well. And also the frequency is low, we may as well give more of a service, is how controllers will see it. They go, well, I may as well find out more. I may as well discuss more and tell you exactly the best I can give you. But when it does get a bit busier, that will be reverting closer, more back to Class G CTAF. This is the traffic. This is where they are. It's now your job to go discuss with them and work out how you are separating with them. But again, we are still there. So VFR aircraft in this. Sorry, Matt. Yep.
Yes, it's David. Simon, would you like me and Jill to just go through a few of those questions on the right before they back up too much?
Yep, definitely. Let's
give Simon
do the questions.
A break from the talking stick. Just on that first question about the speed, just looking at a couple of the GNS RNAV approaches for Ballina there out of AIP. The commencement speed for those is maximum not above 210 knots. So as Jill said, they'd be slowing down after that point. To tie in with that sort of question from Alan, what do the RPTs do? We've got some great feedback from David McCutcheon, the head of flight ops at Jetstar. Basically, what he said is he works it out for himself, and will, as necessary, hold his position above the circuit if there are slow-moving aircraft and he's not in the right position for it. And as necessarily will go around until the small aircraft are out of the road. So again, that's the bit Simon introduced at the start, where that's the dialogue that the RPT aircraft will have with you when you're up there in the circuit. You know, in that sense, they want to ensure a safe flight as much as you do. So of course, that's the negotiation that you can expect from those RPT pilots. The question about the Class D, this one comes up all the time. The SVIS service effectively is a continuation of the mandatory broadcast area at Ballina that was previously operated by the CAGRAS. There's another one of these over at Ayers Rock, our national treasure. And it's a very similar procedures to the AFIS at Port Hedland. In the sense, when we're at Heck Field, these procedures, from depending how long you've been flying, brought back memories from the remote AFISs and the MBZs, etc., prior to Airspace 2000. So not too unfamiliar as far as what you need to do, and it's also one of the reasons why we published such a large initial ARP SUP for Ballina, 8 pages and all, to really give you that education on that sheet, as well as then, as Simon said, the controllers would help you with it as you get used to it. As far as the Class D goes, this is a graduated service offering as we get towards a Class D one day, hopefully, at Ballina, based on the growth. But as you see, we're in a very fluctuating time as far as traffic density goes. And for example, traffic dropped off at Ballina 57% and 90% within the last 2 weeks based on COVID border restrictions. So one day when traffic resumes and CASA IAR and Airservices and aviation thinks that something's warranted at Ballina, we might see one. We will be doing a lot more sessions at Mangalore for Darren there. They will occur once we finished a session today. We will, on approval from CASA, have that ARP SUP out for you, and it's much easier to continue the education program when you can see the SUP in front of you. So yes, certainly there'll be Mangalore, and COVID willing, we hopefully will get on the ground at places like Mangalore, Ballarat, Moorabbin, everywhere that flies up to Mangalore. Jeff, can Airservices see ADSB conspicuity? And I can say that now because I've said it so many times, devices such as Sky Echo. Not at the moment. However, we're working on a program this financial year with CASA to commence a trial. We've got a few volunteers who are member observers of Astra, and we're going to start to do some bench testing of those devices with our ADSB system, and then hopefully within an appropriate amount of time work with the regulator to be able to use them on the controller's display, like what you saw there that Matt put up. So that's coming. Watch this space. Hi Matt, how's it going? Yeah, thanks, happy to be here, Matt. Okay, and I think I've caught up with a few. I'll just have a bit more time to read some there, Jill, and I'll get back to the next lot.
Oh, nice work there, David. Thank you. There was some really good questions. And I think one of the key things from Ian's question about apparently introducing another aerodrome-specific procedure, it is actually intended from Airservices to roll this out at a number of airports, isn't it? We've got Ballina, we've got Mangalore, but in the future there'll be other perhaps high traffic volume airports where these processes will be added to assist safety and alerted see and avoid.
Yeah, so that's part of that growth window that we have, where at the moment, the way that the legislation works, there's a big jump between nothing a CAGRIS or now an AFIS type service, and then a tower. And so the idea is when we put a tower in, it costs a lot of money. And so the idea, this is going to enhance that safety level. So places where you see a lot of growth, and we always keep an eye on these statistics, have potential for this service to be rolled out. And part of that assessment that Cass has done initially at Ballina and hopefully at Mangalore is to be able to use that cookie cutter methodology to roll this to the next most appropriate places.
Perfect. We have got one sort of RAAus specific question that is quite relevant to what we're talking about from Shane, asking about whether we're talking about a CTA. I assume that's what you're talking about, Shane, a CTA endorsement for RAAus. That's certainly something we're working towards. And we're actually quite, from an organisational perspective, quite grateful that we've got a interim step like SFIS or SAFIS, whatever the pronunciation currently is at the moment, to allow our members to continue to operate in a high traffic area like Ballina and still remain quite safe or much safer. So yes, Shane, the intent eventually is to end up with a CTA endorsement for RAAus pilots if they want it. Simon, do you want to go back to your presentation for the moment? We'll let some of those comments roll in.
I'll just touch on the Class D because that also brings up another point. The month, the 3-month, the 6-month, the 12-month review, which I've never seen happen. Dave's got a lot more experience than I do, but I'm not sure he would have seen something like this. Ballina SFIS is now a week old, and in 3 weeks we'll have a full review. And that's been done with, all the bolts as well. We're looking at everything. And even now we're aware the traffic's low. The 3 months is being done quite seriously as well. I'm having catch-ups with the neighbouring sectors with a lot of this feedback as well, CASA. So, if more information comes out that this step up is not quite enough, we'll have that information very quickly. So I think that's a big part here, that those reviews are being done seriously and not only internally as well. Definitely we'll be back here to do the external part as well.
Yep. I'll just answer a couple of more questions there before they slip off the top, and it doesn't look like I'm ignoring them. The question Nathan had there, unfortunately, Matt, I'm not sure about the pictures you got on the rest of the slide pack, but when you don't flight plan, what the controller can do is if you have flight planned, they activate a flight plan, and it's what they call a flight plan track. So instead of seeing that little circle you saw on Matt's picture there, they'll see a square, and what the square does, it approximates based on the indicated airspeed, the aircraft position. Then what you can do is update that with your position reports, and the controller can effectively move the little square along the screen. This is actually what we do with oceanic flights that are up at flight level 380, because we can't see them out there over the wide ocean. So you're no different in that sense. Every time you update a position, the controller can move your square, and then he'll give procedural type traffic to the inbound Jetstar of where you are. If you're crop dusting, if you're doing some acrobatic works or whatever it is that you do at Ballina or Mangalore, they'll know where you are even if they can't see you. The answer for Ron, I would suggest, Ron, it's just like anything. If you never go to Ballina and you live in Darwin and you're happy up there, you'll never need to know about it. But like if you did a overland adventure or a caravan with a whole heap of people in a fly-in, you'd brief yourself on that. When we did the work with CASA and industry on Ayers Rock, very much we learnt that it's and the term a national treasure, and Byron Bay certainly is, but not at the moment. You wouldn't go there for quids. So if you're ever going down there, Ron, I'd suggest you brush up on it. Otherwise, give somebody a call, and I'm sure Jill or Airservices will help you.
Perfect. Thanks, David. Simon, do you want to go on there and we'll let some more comments roll up?
Yeah, and probably best is just to throw the questions up when they come. I think we can all jump through. So we might not need the map for this if you want to just talk like this. So things you can expect on the calls. So the IFR aircraft, as I said, this is the area frequency. So when they're taxiing at Ballina, they'll make their taxi call on this frequency. They'll get a code, just like the VFR, and they'll be given pertinent traffic. Same traffic. 3 VFR on the circuit, or if we deem it that we need to tell them exactly who that is, that's what we'll do. Alpha Bravo Charlie 5 mile final. They'll do their following CTAF calls, make one departure call, and that's on the CTAF, which is now the area frequency, just as the VFR aircraft are required to do on this mandatory broadcast. They'll be identified. Now, the IFI aircraft, especially the fast movers, want to get off this frequency quickly. If there's no relevant traffic, we'll be passing them next sector straight away. So that's, we've told them that so they can inspect to just bang, you're out of the way. Now, the intent is not to issue clearances on this frequency. However, now if you could go back to the first map I had, and I'll just illustrate where there would be maybe clearances. So that VFR aircraft that's tracking southbound, 7,500, say they're a bit higher now. Still in Class G airspace. Jetstar Virgin, Ballina, 06 departure, left-hand turn. Now, again, not the intent to issue clearances, but this is where we'd want to keep both aircraft on frequency to watch them through the levels instead of having them on different frequencies. So this controller would go to the neighboring controller, get a clearance from them, and then issue it to the aircraft, watch them through, and then pass that aircraft on. Just so it's much easier, one controller talking to both aircraft, able to monitor the situation instead of two controllers. So that is probably one of the, there'll be other times in situations that come up, but that is one of the main ones where there'll be clearances given on this frequency. One that's come up in the first week that's we're looking at the moment. So VFR aircraft heading back to Gold Coast, which is a common one, very common. So if they're G to C, which is quite rare, that's 7,500. They'll be given handed directly off to Gold Coast approach, so they can issue that a clearance. If they're any lower than that, so if they're any lower than 6,500, they'll be going G to G before getting that clearance through the step. Now, what we've noticed is aircraft calling up the Gold Coast approach frequency while in the middle of our middle of Ballina SFIS frequency. That's fine. As long as you can monitor both frequencies, you have to remain on this frequency. We are looking at that internally, what the best process is. We've gone with the neighbouring sector does see you coming, especially now because we will have the jurisdiction of that aircraft. And that's, when I say jurisdiction, that's what Matt was showing before, that we have that track. Even if it's not on surveillance, we'll have some symbol that shows Gold Coast approach that there is an aircraft approaching. So if they're heading to the north. And this is where one of the things we're looking at is not having to re-identify. So we'll go identification terminates, frequency transfer approved. However, you want to go through the Gold Coast steps at 3,500. Gold Coast approach will have to re-identify you. At the moment, that is the process, but internally we're trying to just do that a bit better. So that's something we're looking at on our side, and that's come out of just 1 week of already reviewing our own sort of steps and how we're looking at things. And those things are what we're looking at. Another one that came up is, now I found this out, I think when we were down there in March in Ballina, there's 18 ALAs in Ballina broadcast area. That was the first question I got when doing the first one of these. So that put me on my ass a little bit. That's something we're learning. We're learning the local knowledge as well and how often they get used. Some of them don't get used at all, obviously. Also, the VHF doesn't pick all of them up. It picks some of them up. And so what we're looking for aircraft landing at the ALAs is a report entering their circuit or on approach. And that'll be when the service finishes for those aircraft going to the ALAs. The ARP SUP, as precisely as we wrote it, some people have had a little misread on that reference Ballina and ALAs and for landing in ALAs. But what we're looking for is if they can report in the circuit or on final, and that'll finish our operations with them. It means we don't have to keep passing traffic. We don't have to chase that aircraft up. And so it just finishes the service. And that leads me to the next point. One of our biggest mandatory calls is the report clear of runway, or report vacated the runway. There's a few reasons here. One, it completes the service. So we no longer have to keep passing traffic on you. You've finished your service with us. It's all good. Another thing is our duty of care. So if you haven't made that report, we now we will pass that information on to aircraft that could be 10 minutes south going Alpha Bravo Charlie hasn't reported clear of the runway, just to confirm the runway is clear. So that's a big one. I believe in Ballina, the chats I've done, most aircraft do it. From the first week, I think a high majority have, but that's just one of those calls that we're looking at to see if we can keep that as close to 100% as possible.
While you're having a bit of a break there, there's a couple of other comments.
Yeah, I'll jump
Not
in, Jill.
necessarily related.
Yeah, Jill,
but,
I want to give you some
Yeah.
credit, so it doesn't sound like it's coming from you. Reference that a CTA trial and Class D and using Camden as a candidate. Jill has been working for labouring for many years to try to get this progressed through Astra, of which I'm a part of as well. She's been talking with the airlines about it, so certainly. Shane, I think it was in Charles. If you want to get in touch with Jill to see how that's progressing, and certainly it's very off topic for here, but something that RAAus is keen on progressing. And again, the feedback when we ran that through Airservices is the ATCs don't mind as long as they make all the right calls. So it's very much about that participation with the bigger, faster, heavier buses, as Walter calls them. That's the key for the airlines to make sure that you guys all do the right thing. And as you know, I think you said, Jill, you can go into certain CTRs like Archerfield and that, depending on what you're up to. But again, it's only locally. The idea, what Jill wants to do, is spread that out across Australia, particularly for those recreational holiday type flights you might like to do.
There's actually an interesting update there, David. We've got 13 of our flight training schools at the moment. I know this is off topic from the SAFA, so I apologise for that. But just to answer Charles' question, we have got 13 schools operating in Class D now, training RAAus pilots and doing private hire under a CASA instrument. So we are actually already doing that trial, and that's spreading the word and the groundwork for CASA to approve us for controlled airspace access generally. There was a question from Shane. You're talking about Shell Harbour now having commercial operations. Depending on the level of activity, Shane, obviously, if there's a high level of activity into that airport, that might be something Airservices might consider for a SAFIS or SFIS in the future.
That's a good point, Shane, and I think certainly part of that feedback in the PIR process, when we talked about this SAFIS model being the cookie cutter for potential interim steps towards Class D, is if you have experienced locations where you think it's quite busy or warranted. We have our own stats, but again, that complexity picture comes from the pilot's view. Some examples we're seeing on our radar, excuse the pun, places like Wagga, Orange, Dubbo, Mildura, Port Macquarie. A lot of this is a bit fluctuating because of COVID and less recreational travel with the jets coming out of Sydney and Melbourne to those holiday destinations. But any ideas you have, feel free to forward them where you think something like this is assuming you guys think it is a safety improvement. We're happy to listen.
I think probably speaking on behalf of the organisation, yes, it's a great, as you said, intermediate sort of method to manage interactions between quite fast aircraft and slower aircraft who might not necessarily be used to sharing an uncontrolled environment. So I'd like to just put forward that the interactions we've had with the Airservices team have been fantastic, including, as you mentioned earlier, the EC devices. We're actually assisting CASA and Airservices on that project as well. So there's a whole lot of interactions going on behind the scenes that our members might not be aware of to try and improve safety without necessarily adding extra expense, cost or complexity. Nathan's got a question about concern about the congestion on the frequency. Maybe Matt or Simon, you might be able to speak about that.
Yeah, so there's two things here. It's not just frequency congestion we're aiming for, it's frequency management that we're bringing as well. We do understand that the early months, it's going to be tough lowering this, and this is also on our side, trying to tighten up our stuff to lower it, to, as I said, tightening up the traffic. And we're angling that from many ways. As I said, all that IFR traffic, that duplicated calls are happening on previous frequencies. There are additional calls, that's true, the taxi call and such. But yeah, the frequency management's a big part of it. And we have been down to Ballina. We have talked to local operators, TNG, White Star, the helicopter ops. We've been in very close contact with, making sure that we can, again, lower that congestion from them, sort of get an idea of what their flights are and how to best help there. But we are definitely want to continue reaching out to those, and if those reach out, and that goes for everyone here, if there's things we're doing on the comms that you think we can tighten up as well, please feel free to share that. If you've got any information you want to pass on to us, please, Bree. That's good to know, Nathan. And that's I believe we have reached out to you with White Star and have talked multiple times.
Yeah. Talk to JJ, who's the CFI there for the RAAus perspective, but maybe obviously Nathan's from the CASA perspective. So yeah, we've definitely interacted.
I might jump in there as well a little bit about the frequency congestion there, and it sort of ties into a few of the points I was making a little bit earlier, where I think the SFIS service can really deliver benefit in that way is if you just consider it more like a streamlining of the current services there, and there's ways that we can all work together to help that a lot. A lot of that is just coming from things like having flight plans in the system, using your surveillance equipment if you've got it, giving us the right updates with operations, and then rather than having to go chase, and it probably comes across the same for the airlines as well, rather than people having to try and chase others for information, it can just be presented a lot more proactively or a lot smoother there as well. For example, if you consider somebody flying from Lismore, tracking across to Lennox Head, then down south to Ballina and back to Lismore, if they're not on surveillance and they don't have a flight plan in the system, it's a lot of comms for everyone involved to try and work out who you are, where you are, what are you doing, what are your intentions, getting updates the whole way through. Okay, where are you now? Can you update me when you're established in your airwork area? Or can you update me when you've departed? Or can you update me when you're clear of the zone? That's the kind of thing that I think we're really working hard at from the air traffic controller side there to streamline these kind of processes there to reduce the frequency clutter, or getting the updates so that everyone has an accurate situational awareness of where each aircraft is. There's times when the air traffic controllers can act as translators and potentially pass traffic information a bit more relevantly to different types of operators, and that's something we train very hard for in the simulator. For example, the way we pass traffic to an RPT aircraft relative to IFR waypoints is very different to how we try and pass it to VFR aircraft, which may not necessarily have a GPS in the cockpit, or they're relying on dead reckoning navigation. So yeah, that's basically, I think, the goal there, and how we're trying to hopefully reduce frequency congestion as best as we can. And that's also why we'll be asking a lot of, or either have to ask a lot of questions or don't have to ask a lot of questions if we have the information readily available. And that's basically when we are asking questions, it's to streamline and get the accurate information out there. I hope that helps.
That's a really good point.
Yeah, to add on to what Matt said there, the big difference is that let's call it the right of the controller to differentiate and disseminate only what's necessary, i.e. traffic that's not traffic doesn't need to be passed, that's their discretion, and that ability to reduce the reciting of a roll call over and over and over again. And so our predictions are, once these initial couple of weeks of people realizing we're there and we're watching and we're helping, we would expect a significant reduction in overall RT because of that reduction of roll call. I'll answer Knowles's question there. How low will Class E be around Ballina area? So it's currently where it is. When Airservices proposes change in the future, more than likely the Class E above Ballina will be 6,500 only. It won't come all the way down to the ground. And the idea then is, if there's Class E above at 6.5, we would amend the procedures to exclude that Class E from this area, and that would be on the area frequency above. But that is at least another year and a bit away, I would hope. Not to be confused, and you've got plenty of time to settle into this set of procedures.
There's another question there from Shane, which is probably pretty important when we've got a lot of pilots that use, a lot of pilots that use EFBs, Oz Runways and AvPlan, etc. So I assume, David, you can probably answer that one.
Yeah, so this is the difference between what's legal and not legal. Oz Runways, I think, uses some of the similar feed to Flight Radar 24, but they can also use those weird and wonderful local ADS-B transmitters, which we're not allowed to use legally. However, legally, we've got ADS-B coverage and radar coverage in the area. So we've done some side-by-side comparisons, Simon and Matt, and pretty much we're seeing more than what Oz Runway see in that sense.
Yeah, for the surveillance, what you're looking at, transponders, if you're on an IFR approach, we'll get you all the way down to the circuit. In the circuit, 50-50. Off to the coast is pretty good. It's to the west of the mountains that, like I said before, 5-6 miles west of Ballina, it could be up to 3,500 possibility. ADS-B, it gets below the circuit. There are times it's a bit better than that, but yeah, it gets below the circuit, and we'll always get aircraft on departure. So that's the main category there. But again, out to the west with those mountains. Same as the VHF coverage, and that touches back that one of the other things to raise as well. There'll be times when we don't hear the aircraft on the ALAs departing, or aircraft quite low near the mountains. And there could be, but CTAF, line of sight, you'll be able to talk to each other. We've been trained for that in the simulator. We'll hear that. We understand that there'll be comms, again, CTAF Class G procedures.
Awesome. If we, Maret, perhaps put up a bit of a quick link too for the FAQs that we've produced and provided to Airservices as well for our members to have a look at with some of those commonly asked questions that some of our members have been asking. But Simon, you probably got a little bit more on your presentation there, I believe, to go.
I don't know. I think it might be better just to go. I think the flight threading that we've done and the questions is probably the best way to go about this. It sounds. If you've got, I think it's probably a better bet if you've got some questions already lined up, because that'll lead into everything. So yeah, I'm happy to do that.
Yep. Well, there's one question that popped up, I think, on the very first day, talking about whether the controller is actually at Ballina, and we've addressed that a little bit. But I think that was probably a little bit of a crossover from the CAGRAS being based at the Ballina airport itself. So again, the key message is that if you have a transponder, you turn it on and use it. If you've got a flight plan capability, put the flight plan in. That'll make Matt's job and his colleagues a whole lot easier. Jordan, have you got any questions that are popping up? If everyone else has done a lot of talking.
Yeah, there's a couple that we sort of prepared and we've got for some people. I guess I want to just touch quickly on something Walter brought up before. He used to hate driving buses into the uncontrolled airspace. Well, this will actually help that from both sides. And obviously, we're focusing really on a VFR point of view for us today. But it'll help both sides. So the people who are flying the big jets or the smaller IFR aircraft will get equal as benefit, if not slightly more, than the VFR pilots. What other questions do we have? I guess one of the questions, and we've already touched on it, is slightly, will there be a charge? Will Airservices charge for this service at all? I don't know whether you want to touch on that, David.
Right. Class G free, and whatever you're paying now is what you got. Yeah, it's so the idea is this is one of those things where for CASA assess that, industry judges for us. We have long-term pricing agreements with the airlines who pay the bulk of our bills, and the airlines wanted this at Ballina in that sense, and that's why we got so much support from them. and was the key to landing it. And when RAAus come on board, it made all the difference as well. So that both ends of town, and certainly Airservices and our board felt that it was the right thing to do in that sense. And knowing the economics of building a control tower, this is cheap as chips. And it significantly improves the safety, I would think, because we're using both flight following in that sense for every flight in there, and our surveillance system as well.
Yeah, well said. Yep. Plus G, all free. I love it. And obviously that appeals to the RAAus world. I think it's a benefit that we're getting the experience of people like Matt and Simon and David in the area. Obviously David's not on the comms, but he's sitting in the big chair checking out what's going on. There was a question I had there about. There's one from Shane, which is actually quite valid, about logging a flight plan with NAIPS through Oz runways. And that actually can be quite a good alternate way. If you're using accurate waypoints on your Oz runways plans, it will submit a NAIPS flight plan for you, which will greatly assist the Airservices folks. So
yeah, that's right. So before this system got up and running at Ballina, and the same will apply for Mangalore, the controllers, anything you put in NAIPS would sit in the backlog of our flight data processor, and we could call it up if we had to. What we've done is, if you do plan in that vicinity now, we'll push the flight plans through to Matt and co, and they'll actually be there ready to access for them. So that's the difference between having to call up on the air with the minimal flight details for Matt just to be able to pull it up from the call sign. Takes about 1 or 2 seconds at that.
And I'll add to that as well, because we've had a couple that haven't gone through, but that's fine. We've raised that with our NAIPS system, and they've now put it in for that criteria to meet the criteria that it will go into the system straight away. So again, that more data getting in, the better. Because I work Brisbane radar, so I've been on those times when you've called up, this is Alpha Bravo Charlie, and I've gone, confirm you've got a flight plan. Gone and typed it in, not there, confirm you got a flight plan, then had to go talk to someone else. And that's what we're trying to get rid of, that middleman. So Matt and fellow controllers have access to it really quickly. You're not waiting. You're not second guessing. We're not second guessing you. So, yep. And again, the more data, the better.
Yeah, and the beauty of that in that sense as well is that for those training flights that you might do later in 152s and 172s and whatever, from Archerfield and Redcliffe and whatever, and you're going down that way to have a fun day out, and you want to come back through the Cooley Zone or whatever it is, that plan will be the same plan that runs through the system all day. So that's the benefit of that.
awesome.
Jill, you touched on as well the person being in Brisbane Centre. So there's a lot of good things that come with the controller being in Brisbane Centre too. This person sits 2 meters away from the shift manager, who's 5 meters away from the ops manager, next to fellow controllers. What that brings in is things like emergencies. We have people that deal with this, trained with this. You'll have numerous controllers working on this. They have access to every outlet there is. So knocking on wood, you hear VFR on top of cloud, VFR in cloud. You're going to have the best people doing as much as possible who've been trained to do it to help you do what you can do. And I think that's a big thing the Brisbane Centre does bring. Again, yes, we're not at the runway, so there's disadvantage of not seeing the runway, but there is some advantages as well.
That's a really important point, Simon. Thank you. Because there was a question about existing services like weather or CAGRIS being affected with the model that's being put forward, but everything that's available to an air traffic controller normally in terms of weather and species and all the reports that might happen are still available to these people flying in the Ballina BA. So I think there's a whole lot of advantages. We're all eagerly watching what happens, and of course the COVID lockdown kind of put a spanner in the works as far as traffic levels, but might have actually made it easier to ease into the process to start with. So I think
certainly with that weather, the idea is, and controllers do this all around the country every day, particularly where there's a couple of flights into the odd places. Emerald or whatever, they'll write down the most recent approach attempts. They'll know the cloud base, particularly if the weather's claggy. How many people are holding above. Ballina, as you know, can have some bad days with the weather. And so for that shift, those controllers will pretty much know what's going on there, just like the Cagris did, as far as, what the minimum was versus the TTF or the TAF or whatever. So, yeah, they do their best and very much all provide weather updates for that are first-hand from the last pilot who's tried to get in there.
And just to add to that as well, I think particularly with the weather, a lot of the controllers that have the SFIS endorsement also work the sectors surrounding it. And in an 8-hour shift, you might, arrive in the morning and see the line of storms 100 miles to the west of Ballina, and then throughout the day you see how the traffic picture, how the weather situation evolves, and you can see a squall line or something like that slowly moving across, and everyone gets a good feel of the weather. And maybe for someone located at an aerodrome, their ability to watch what's happening is, I guess, limited to a much smaller location, being whatever they can see with their eyes effectively, where we have a very good picture of all the jets are diverting way out to the west, out near Moree at 8 in the morning. By 10 o'clock in the morning, they're down near Armadale, by further on, and we just get a really good feeling for what the weather's doing throughout the day and can build that into the service as well for expectations. And
I will raise that so the AS is no longer there. So the access to the AWIS that the pilots have and we have, MEDARs, SPECIs and TAFs. It also brings to a point, because we've been asked quite a bit, especially as air traffic controllers. So there'll be no preferred runway. A pilot in command, this Class GC TAF, is in charge of the runway. Just say you ask Matt, what runway? He'll tell you the last 2 aircraft land on runway 06. That's the sort of reply you can expect. You can get a wind report out of one of those aircraft if you want. Just say there's 2 VFR doing circuits for 06, and the next one decides they want to do circuits for 24. Again, pilot in command, but what you can expect is an emphasis on that. Alpha Bravo Charlie, confirm circuits 24. We have 2 VFR aircraft in the circuits for 06. Again, pilot in command, but we'll emphasize, are you definitely asking for that? We'll pass that traffic to the other circuit as well. That goes for if you want to depart off 24 and someone's coming in off 06. Again, pilot in command, but we'll emphasize that. Be like traffic is on opposite final. If it gets close enough, that's when we get talking about safety alerts and such things. Now, we hope we don't get to that. We've emphasized the point, but it is pilot in command is in charge of the runway.
And just touching on that more, Simon, is it mandatory to follow the advice on tracking requirements from ATC in this case?
Definitely not. So even a safety alert, we would be suggesting. So Alpha Bravo Charlie, safety alert, suggest turn right, heading this, or that sort of. We'd always suggest climb, suggest that. Someone did ask me, could you give us a heading that could keep clear? Just say I've given you traffic, and you just can't get them sighted. You've still got a few miles left. You're not too close, but you just can't get the aircraft sighted. Can you give me a heading that'll keep me clear? What I would say in that preference is most likely Alpha Bravo Charlie, there's no traffic out to your left. And so that's the sort of, so I've given you the information. Look, there's nothing out to your left there. That's the sort of cause you can expect. But we understand. We're still duty of care. If it's getting real tight, we're going to throw some emphasis on those sort of things, and we will understand in your voice as well that we're trying to do the best we can. So we'll make that even more precise when we can. But those are the sort of calls you can expect.
Especially in regards to that, it's we very much try and run a graded response to these traffic scenarios, or safety alerting and all that kind of stuff, where we'd rather pass the traffic early, and what we're trying to achieve is slowly transferring our situational awareness into the cockpit of the pilot, because we can see the situation unfolding very easily with the radar or with the display we have. It's a matter of getting the picture accurately across to the other pilots involved in it. So, for example, say one aircraft tracking southbound coastal and one aircraft tracking northbound coastal at the same level. From a graded response, what we'd be doing is when we spot the conflict, when aircraft are just entering the zone, we might pass traffic and say, look, Alpha Bravo Charlie, you've got Delta Echo Foxtrot, opposite direction at the same level. You'll be passing in about 6 minutes time, and try, gauge a little bit of response. Or that's us early on trying to just transfer the picture that we have into the cockpit and then leave it up to the pilots to make the decision for what they want to do. We might let that run for another minute or two and then say, look, okay, I've passed you the traffic once. What are your intentions is the common way we phrase it, which I know it sometimes comes across a bit authoritative, but it's the kind of the best way that we can say it. What are your intentions? Do you still want to continue as you're doing, basically? And let it run further if we have to, and hopefully we just keep updating and updating until we get a positive response from one of the pilots that, okay, yep, someone's going to remain over land, someone's going to remain over water, or some kind of traffic sighted or something like that. So hopefully it doesn't get to that safety alerting stage there where we're having to suggest headings or having to suggest level changes or emergency separation and that kind of stuff. We're just trying to, a graded response is the best way I can phrase that.
And we've got another comment there from Nathan, which I think we can speak to as well. Some concerns from him about the AWUS being pretty hopeless for some of the afternoon sea breezes and inaccuracies in weather or wind direction. I can certainly confirm that Airservices went to quite a bit of trouble when that was alerted to them by local operators to get the Bureau of Met to confirm the AWUS accuracy. So maybe Simon or Matt, you could speak to that a little bit further.
Yeah, that's something, especially because the lack of flying at the moment, and I don't think the weather's been too bad down there, that we're just going to have to keep an eye on. So reports are great. Again, like if you see something like that, please raise it, because that's the only way things are going to change if it really isn't that good. Due COVID, I think they were supposed to go down there day one, but they couldn't. But I'll check back with Tiff, because she's in charge of that with the project lead. But that's something we're keeping a close eye on. So please pass information back to us on that. But yeah, Jill made us aware of that, and it was a really good point, because it's very relevant. Yeah,
that was actually feedback from JJ, operating under white staff from RAAus. So it's great. The communications that we've had, I think, have been really good. There's been great flow from Airservices, RAAus, the local operators. It's still obviously never going to be perfect, but I think we've probably had a really great level of interaction and consultation with this process. And that's not going to stop just because the service has started. As you said, Simon, we've got a 1 week, 1 month, 3 month, 6 month, 12 month review. Airservices has, but we as pilots can provide feedback to Airservices on any issues that we determine might be a problem.
100%. And like, our controllers are very used to operating with IFR aircraft into G, into C. This is one of the things that's new to them as well. So keep that in mind. They've been trained well, but they'll need to learn a bit more on the job and exposure as well. So that's where we definitely need the feedback, but also want to come back and do this sort of stuff as well, and hopefully bring more of our controllers as well to pick your brains as well.
Maybe you could just finish up, because I see we've gone well past our hour, but it's been really good information. Maybe you could give everyone a bit of an understanding of the sort of simulations and the work that you did in preparation, because I know there was a ton of work going on in the background prior.
Yeah, Matt was a big part of that. It's very different from all our other simulations. We are very used to responding to calls. It's just ingrained into us from when we start in the academy. For me, that's 13 years ago. I think, Matt, that's 9 years ago. Every call, our whole life, we've responded to our whole career. 80% of the calls we will not be responding to. We're forecasting, maybe more, and that'll be if we get better at this. Is what we want, that number to be higher. And it's not easy to not hit that button to try and jump in. So that was part of the training, was really doing those sort of things, and really targeting that. What is traffic? what isn't traffic, what will help you, and build the picture. And the big thing is, especially Ballina, the complexity with the different aircraft. So Jetstar and Virgin build their picture different. Like their scene avoids quite different. And so we're trying to work with them. When do they exactly want the information? Same as you. When do you want that information? As Matt said, here's the first snapshot. You haven't done anything back to it? I'm going to come back to you. 2 VFR aircraft, ground speed, 80 knots, 5 miles apart. I'm going to keep an eye on them. I might, if they're pointing the other way, I'm probably not going to jump in straight away. Those sort of things is what we're trying to build up with the different picture. The helicopter ops, especially in Class G, is quite different for us as well. So we talk to the local operators to make sure their operations are in there. The frequency congestion, we didn't hide away from that. CASA came in to look at OAR, and we made sure that they saw the run that we had definitely for frequency congestion with VFRs, circuit work, because that's the big one. That's where we're trying to hit. We're trying to help out with that congestion. So that's where the reviews will come in handy. And I think the first month, if there was traffic, you might not see it straight away. What we're aiming for is that, gradually over time that we'll start lowering that, and hopefully it's quicker. Hopefully it speeds that up. Hopefully we keep lowering that. But that's where our sim was targeted at. Also, for all our training, we have to have compromise SEP and emergency training and evaluation. So that was in there as well. So just say Evans Head, if you know Ballina's down there, we had aircraft heading towards that we'd have to give emergency response. An aircraft pops up 4 miles off final when a Jetstar departs. There were those occasions that I talked about where there's a mode Alpha or a mode Charlie that we have to chase. Did you want to add something to that, Matt?
Yeah, I was just going to say, so in regards to the sim training, I was involved in the development of the entire sim course, and I think it was like 8 or 9 trainees back to back through it. So it was one of the busier courses that we've developed there. We really tried to throw in any form of complexity or scenario that we could possibly think of, the whole range of expected options there, and from the big things we tried to target there was, as Simon said, frequency congestion. But for me particularly, having at least some flying training experience, I really tried to focus on teaching my students that put yourself in the cockpit, like what do you think the aircraft can see at this particular point, and then trying to get them to tailor how they're delivering the service to those aircraft, and I did touch on it briefly before, but for example, the see and avoid for a 737 on an instrument approach, and passing traffic relevant to that particular approach versus passing traffic to a VFR aircraft, and really getting them to my trainees to try and understand, do you think the pilots can actually see each other yet or not, and passing traffic accordingly, whether it's passing traffic to just help the pilots start to develop their situational awareness versus achieving a sighting, and just tweaking the information we're passing based on that. And also here Simon mentioned the emergencies there. We really trained for a lot of scenarios there, from engine failures to fires on board, communications failures, you name it. We practiced it there and gave lots of scenarios, compromise separation scenarios, where we practiced safety alerting and suggested avoiding action and all those kind of things to really hopefully get the controllers a good grounding of the issues and passing traffic effectively and being able to respond to emergencies if they ever come up. Hopefully they don't, but yeah. And I guess it's, while I have the floor, I'll just mention my sort of final takeaway point there. Really is it is about teamwork, really, where it's RPT operators, air traffic controllers, VFR aircraft, parachutists, you name it. We're all trying to achieve our little particular operation. We're all trying to just get our job done safely and achieve what we're trying to do. And we're just really hoping that we can all work together as seamlessly as possible and get the service across. I think that's something as well with the particularly with all the requests for why isn't it controlled airspace and why isn't it a tower there? And it's like, well, if you put a tower in controlled airspace there, people lose access to the airspace as well. It's about trying to allow everyone to still achieve what they want, and just making it safe as we can for everyone to get from A to B. Yep.
Yeah, well said, Matt. And I think probably to wrap that up in a nice, neat little package, when I was training back in the dark ages, I used to remind my students that really what you're making a call for is for the benefit of the other people listening. So when you make a call, you're actually trying to give the relevant information so the person in the other aircraft or aircraft in the circuit will understand where you are. And that's really effectively what this is all about. So if you can give the information that's needed on first entry to the BA so that you don't have to have the questions asked from ATC, that obviously makes sense. And I think one of the key things is that it's not over. Tiff is sending me some reminders in the background, so next time I'll have to get her face on the screen as well. Talking about the fact that any feedback that you might have or any changes is still not a finished subject. It is still definitely any changes, improvements, issues or otherwise. But there has been a lot of information already incorporated, as Simon said, from the helicopter operators, from the local training schools. And that's not finished. If anything, I've learned that the Airservices guys and girls are out there, COVID willing, beating the bushes and putting the information out there to educate. There's a last question there from Ethan talking about the restricted areas, which I'm assuming are Evans Head. So again, Simon, you touched on that earlier, that that sort of information, if there's questions and there's availability on the frequency, you can provide that information to pilots.
Yeah, so Matt, you go with that.
Yeah, just the way that we tend to manage it on the unit that administers at Airspaces, we like to do a broadcast, 10 to 15 minutes before it opens, just so that everyone's aware of it, and then I guess it sort of falls under a bit of a duty of care where controllers are watching to see if anyone's tracking towards it, and we just try and again, it's like that graded response. We're just trying to get people's attention before they accidentally fly into it, rather than having an emergency where we're trying to get them out and we're quickly having to call Amberley, who administers the actual restricted airspace, and they've got to get onto the fighter jets and tell them that there's someone in there and that it might be an unsafe situation. So again, it's just about that, just keeping it safe, monitoring that everyone's clear of the airspace, and making broadcasts and reminders is a mitigator that we might use just in general over the frequency to say, hey guys, it's becoming active on the hour. There's no clearances available today, and coming from me as a pilot, I've had to deal with NOTAMs, and they're not the friendliest things to read when you print out a giant book of NOTAMs. The controllers understand it. It is possible to miss these kind of details when they're coming up. You're converting UTC time into local time, and daylight savings gets mixed in there as well if you're coming from Queensland down to the thing. So we do understand. It's not the most user friendly sometimes to keep track of when it's active and when it isn't. But by all means, just ask us, hey, is Evans Head active? Is it becoming active?
Perfect. And I guess to summarise that, G'day Jeffrey from Wagga, not too far away from me, has asked the question about dot points for RAAus members. Well, the best part is the live stream's available as a YouTube and Facebook link. So if you want to sit down and watch the whole thing, I guess the dot point summary is the FAQs that we've actually already produced, and those FAQs will be updated as required. So thanks, Moret. There's our link for our FAQs, which is on the RAAus website. One
Jill,
last question. Oh, sorry, Dave. Yep.
Oh, well, I just wanted to thank you for running it, and just to answer, a few people still have some concerns about it, like Ross. The idea is that PIR process Continue to give us that feedback. Talk to your club, talk to the association, feedback directly to Cassie if you like. But we just ask you, experience it, and if you have any fears, still give us a call, and we want to continue that education campaign, because this is what the airlines wanted, and we want to make it work with RAAus membership and everybody who still wants to go down to Ballina. So thanks, Jill. Thanks, Jordan. Thanks, Matt, and thanks, Simon. And I'll let you wrap up. And thanks, Matt Butel. It's always a pleasure. And I'll let Jill close out her meeting. Thank you.
Sorry, Jill, can I just jump in quickly for one thing? I probably didn't give enough information there. We have been active for a week, but just to reference a couple of big points. 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. That's New South Wales time. SFIS will be active 365, 8 a.m., 6 p.m. New South Wales local time. What you can expect before 8 a.m. We'll do a radio check call with the ARF that are down there, and then we'll do a broadcast that it's opening on the hour, and then we'll do a broadcast that it's closing at 6 p.m. Those are just the major points there. So it's been active since Thursday, and those are the hours.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Simon.
No,
Look, this has been great. I've actually enjoyed interacting with you on this subject, and I'm sure there'll be other topics that we might be able to do something similar. Obviously, when Mangalore is approved as well, we can do something similar. And I'd just like to thank the Airservices team, the whole team, including Tiff hiding in the background. We've really enjoyed our interactions. A great crew. And I think that this process is going to assist safety in terms of the activity levels at Ballina and other high activity level airports. So thanks everyone for their time, and we will sign off for now and see you at some other time.
Thank you very much, guys. Have a great night.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everybody.